Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "Don't Talk to Me a-hole." School for me is early enough that I usually arrive to school about 7 a.m. in the morning. So at this time people have their headlights on since it is still dark outside. On my way into my school's parking lot, I'll make a right turn from the right-hand side of the road. Meaning the other side of the street has to yield to my lane since I have the right-of-way and they are crossing across the flow of traffic. While this is the case, some bumbleduck this morning decided to cut across me despite me already being in the process of turning. Not only did they cut off the car behind in me, they cut across the opposite lane in the school's parking lot to go in front of me. Why they did this I have no idea. We still had 40 minutes until any class started. So after a thorough laying on my horn, they continue to speed away into their spot, so I follow suit and park as well. When I got out of my car to say, "Hey man, what the hell were you thinking?" I'm immediately cut off with a short and curt "Don't talk to me, asshole." I was taken aback by his response because there was no way he didn't know that he was in the wrong here, but I noticed that he decided to leave his lights on. So being the kind person I am, abided by what he said and didn't speak to him any further. Seeing as how his car was a fairly older model, it's very likely that his lights wouldn't automatically turn off, and instead drain his battery and not allow him to get home once school is over. School ends in 20 minutes and I'm very excited to see his reaction. Update: I was walking back to my spot hyping up all of my buddies I carpool about the grand reveal about to happen, and so we were sitting in my car waiting for him to show up, which by the way his car has its headlights off. Later we found out they were not automatic. He finally showed up and sure as crap that typical WRRR noises known as the "your car is fucked" noise started going off. That he proceeded to get out and go over to the teacher watching over the parking lot to presumably ask for help. When they came back to his car with some jumper cables, the teacher, who I am very close to and told this story to earlier today, came over to the closest car to ask for a jump. Guess who the closest car still in the lot was? I promptly told her that I couldn't, as I might have to talk to him while I was jumping his car. Currently I'm having a nice treat with my friends at Taco Bell reminiscing about the whole interaction. I'd say the payout was pretty nice all things considered. The next one is titled, "Stay Here Until I Tell You to Come In." Almost 13 years ago, I was a young private. I had a sergeant who, well, we're not surprised he had 3 divorces. I've had good leadership, I've had bad leadership. This guy was the latter. Yelling in your face enough to cover you in spittle and ring your ears for the smallest infraction instead of teaching. Let's go to my MC. We were on a field exercise, and it was a bag drive. The weather was horrific, we'd been awake for the better part of 3 days and constantly on the move. We just sat down for a second to grab a ration meal before the bag drive continued, and our hero sergeant was in my face losing it because I was supposed to be on sentry guarding the side of the road. He had forgotten, I assume, to delegate that, and I was the closest person the crossroad. He threatened me with charges and told me, "Every one of your friends around would be dead because your incompetent butt can't watch a road." Part of the yelling included, "Don't leave that position until I duck and come get you." So, I went sheltered in some trees, bushes next to the road and waited. It started to rain, and rain, and rain. I was thankful I brought some warm wet weather clothing with me. After about an hour I see the company moving. I wasn't called in. They left for another butt-ducking adventure of the exercise. I stayed put. Night came. I didn't move. I slept like a brick. It was glorious. At dawn the next morning, I stayed put. More hours went by. Later, evening the next day, a range control vehicle came to inspect the site, to ensure we cleaned up after ourselves. I was pretty hungry. So, I challenged the vehicle as any good sentry would. They were very surprised to see me. I got a nice ride back, didn't have to walk the 20-ish km out. My sergeant got to deal with the repercussions of losing a soldier for almost 2 days. I was told they had looked for me, and nearly shut down the exercise to search. The next one is titled, The Day My Butt Got Grounded. So, long story short long, I was a little crap as a kid. I was loud, opinionated, and I preferred books to most people, still do. One area that I rather excelled in, however, was the sister category. See, when I was very small, I desperately wanted a sibling, particularly a brother. They got the best toys, and I wouldn't have to share my clothes. Win-win. Well, I got my wish. My brother is 4 years younger than me, and we've been best friends since I first held his wrinkly little self in the hospital after my mum had him. We spent all of our time together. This sometimes made my mum very proud, and it sometimes drove her absolutely nuts, because she could never get us to rat on the other, and we always took each other's side. If he told her something, I backed it up, no questions asked, and vice versa. Now, I got grounded a lot as a kid, from some pretty common things, and also some things that most kids probably didn't. I once cleaned my room by shoving everything behind my bed, and as a result, my parents shoved every book, toy, and stuffed animal I had into garbage bags by the back door for 2 weeks until I learned to treat my belongings properly and keep my area clean. Boy, did that work more than they anticipated. I was grounded from doing homework on family night because they caught me sneaking into my room to work on a book report that was due in a month. I'm a vigilant anti-procrastinator. Explaining that to my math teacher was weird. She actually called them to confirm. I was grounded from my books, which sucked, when they caught me sitting in a pile of a messy room reading instead of cleaning. But the worst punishment my mum and dad ever gave me wasn't just to me, it was to me and my brother. When my brother and I got particularly troublesome, like the time we decided to tie a bed sheet to the back of my Barbie Jeep and jet ski around the backyard after we'd been told not to. Or the time we played hide and seek at a certain big blue box store only for my brother to poke a hole in his head from falling into one of the clothing racks, or the dozens of times we sneaked into the kitchen at 2 a.m. to watch Gilligan's Island and snack on crackers, American cheese with a side of Oreos. We got grounded from each other. We weren't allowed to talk to each other, hug each other, or play together. It sucked. This particular time, I'm not sure what we'd done to deserve the punishment, but I definitely recall hearing my mother yell, "Get your butts in your rooms and keep them there. I don't want to see you walk out until I say so." Well, our bedrooms were side by side at the end of a long hallway. After about 15 minutes of sitting on my floor, reading Stellaluna for the 1000th time, I called over to my little brother, who was playing with his Matchbox cars in his room. You could always tell, because his favorite part of it was making up his own Michael Bay-style explosions when he rammed the cars into each other. Think of a cute little 5-year-old yelling, "Kablooey," and boom, through a wall. "Hey B, for brother. Come over to your door. Mommy said we're supposed to stay in our rooms. I don't want to get in trouble again." "You won't. Look, grab your pillow from your bed and lay it on the floor outside your room, okay? Look, I'm going to do the same." We proceeded to put our pillows on the floor just outside our bedroom doors, and I told him to lay down in his room with his head on the pillow, just outside it. In my mind, I was doing exactly what she said. To the letter. She grounded our butts and wanted them to stay in our rooms. And in our rooms, they were. My dad found us about an hour later, sound asleep in the same positions, after we had played a couple of rousing games of 20 questions and talked about wanting to watch The Lion King again. If memory serves, this was a long time ago. My mum found us by following my dad's laughter. We were ungrounded shortly after because, as my dad put it, he couldn't be mad at me for beating them at their own game. My mum just rolled her eyes and told him, "She's definitely your kid." The next one is titled, "You Want Directions to Where?" Okay. First off, before we start, this is in the UK. This happened in 2019 to me personally. I live in the UK in a tourist town, city in the UK, and as such when we are in the city, town centre we often get tourists asking directions to this thing and that. No biggie most of the time. I just happily point in the direction, give as good of a description as I can, and off I go. This Saturday afternoon in midsummer I'm with my family and we are in town and looking for a place to eat when a tourist stops me, asks where can I find the Citadel. Now let me make this clear, I'm in the north of England and only one place has what I know of as the Citadel, and that's in Carlisle, around 5 hours car or train journey away. So I politely say, "Sorry, I don't know what you mean." The tourist and his wife stop me and in a thick America accent say again, I want to go see your citadel. Now normally most US tourists are amazingly polite and nice, but this cantankerous bastard was anything but. I repeated, I'm sorry, I lived here all my life and the nearest citadel is Carlisle that I know of, but that's, turned red and shouting at me, I don't care what you think, you hillbilly, now tell me how to get there. This is yelled at the top of his lungs 6 inches away. So I calmly say okay, no problem, and I proceed to give him directions that will eventually lead him to a station nearby, not in the town, city, but a village outside. It'll take him around 2 hours to walk there. He notes them down, I even point out landmarks he will see, real things I mean. I then say he will need to board a local train to a sleepily little place, actually it's a larger city, then changes trains to X being a town with a station around 1 to 2 hours south of Carlisle, and tell him he can get a connecting train from there. He smirks and says, here you hillbilly, that wasn't so bad to be nice now was it, and gives me a quarter. No kidding, I have it cleaned off, of course, still in a jar in my office on a shelf full of other coins you can't spend in the UK. You will be amazed how many dodgy coins you get from machines in the UK. I have no idea if the idiot followed my directions or not, or if he realized I gave him the most convoluted journey I could think of on the fly. Still makes me laugh to think of the idiot and his poor wife stuck of a train to Carlisle wondering where it all went wrong. Yes, I was a little shitty bit. If he had have listened, I would have asked if he meant a local castle, but like I said, I've lived here all my life and it's never been referred to as a citadel, and told him how to get there in 5 minutes. Lesson of the story. Don't be in a hole, quick edit. I mentioned this further up, but it's worth saying again, 99.99% of the American tourists I meet or interact with are very polite and very friendly, which is lovely to see. This is the one exception I've come across. The next one is titled, Have a Very Mute Christmas. My parents weren't the nicest of people. I don't want to go into too much detail. Well, obviously as a child I was hyped by Christmas. One Christmas in particular was special. 13 days before Christmas we decided to set up the tree. I was excited, because you only get to do that once a year. I was maybe 14 or 15 at the time, and I was quite a responsible child. Any normal person would see Christmas as a time of joy and happiness. My parents see it as a time to get angry at me for anything they can. You can't put an ornament there, or you put up the Christmas tree wrong, and stupid stuff like that. I was being on my best behavior, according to their standards, that day, and I made sure to do everything perfectly, which of course was all wrong to them. I was lightening the mood by cracking a few jokes and trying to make it a good time while we put up the Christmas tree. My mum, who is the queen of all Karens, said that I was talking too much, and that, and I quote, Christmas is more Christmassy when you don't talk. I was gobsmacked at this woman. Then I had a plan. The only thing I said was, oh why thank you, as sarcastically as I could, which is out of my character, and I took an oath of silence for as long as I possibly could until Christmas was over. The whole day I went without talking. Then the next day. And the next day. Each day my mum got more and more furious. Finally, on Christmas Day, she had had enough and started screaming at me how you should address your parents with, yes ma'am, and how I was being so disrespectful. The only words that came out of my mouth that day were, but it's more Christmassy when I don't talk. She never told me to be quiet again. The next one is titled, Manager Wouldn't Let Me Take Breaks. I work part-time at a pharmacy chain. I personally don't smoke, but all of my co-workers do. If there are customers in the store or not, they will have me cover for them for 10 to 15 minute smoke breaks in the back every hour or two. I asked my manager if maybe I could take a 15-minute break if there weren't customers, and my manager said no, I can only take smoke breaks or bathroom breaks. So every 2 or 3 hours if there's no customers I take a bathroom break for 15 minutes. The next one is titled, Equal Pay for Equal Work. I used to work in a medical lab and all of my teammates were male and I am female. I did almost twice as much as anyone else and got paid less than anyone else in the same position in the entire lab, including females. Eventually I noticed that I did more work when my co-workers were asking me to help them out with their job because I was efficient and had extra time. I asked for a raise or to be put on an easier project. My boss said no because I made sure things were done on time and I was the only one who could actually do all the work. I decided to do the exact same amount of work as the coworker that makes the next lowest amount of money, so it's still more than me but also pretty low. When I started doing this, I started getting behind in my work and had a meeting with my boss. We all send daily updates to the team, so I pulled out my coworker's daily updates and my daily updates and showed him that they were exactly the same. I'm on a different project, but it takes the same amount of time to do the same work, it's just that my project is more intensive. I asked to be bumped up to that co-worker's salary, and if I was bumped up I would do more work. He said no. I went to HR, they said talk to him. I talked to his boss, who told me to talk to him, who said no. He stopped complaining about being behind and asked my project manager to help me out on my project. He ended up being utterly useless and acting like a child when I explained I was done with work and showed him my coworker's previous daily update and explained that's all I got paid to do, so that's all I'm doing. He basically just stalked me to watch what I was doing, but my boss only wanted proof I was actually in the lab, not that I was doing work. I decided to amp it up. My next lowest paid coworker made 12% more than me, so I did 12% less than him. Now I still have all my previous skill, so I would just sit myself at a computer and just play games or whatnot for the remainder of my shift. It drove him up the wall. Especially cause that's all I could do in the rules, so if he asked me to not do that, I had email chains between him and I about where and what I could do during breaks. We had required 2 15-minute breaks on the clock and an off-the-clock lunch. However, we can't use our phone in the lab. Most chairs were in dirty, biohazardous areas and clean chairs were limited, and it'd be rude to move those. But sitting on the floor in the locker room was unprofessional. We could use our phones in offices, but we couldn't take breaks in there because we'd be a distraction. The building was huge and had one break room that took 3 to 4 minutes to walk to from my lab, and breaks were 15 minutes total, so that was useless. I tried sitting in the hall, but creepy guys kept coming by once they figured out my routine. So, I'm taking my breaks in the lab on the lab computer, but it's 15 minutes uninterrupted. If you get asked a question or interrupted in any way, then you restart your 15 minutes. There was no way I was going to be in the lab and it'd be quiet and I wouldn't get interrupted, especially if I went down the BuzzFeed quiz black hole. Everyone wanted a go at it as well. So I could take my 15-minute breaks in the lab and get them to last 2 hours within the rules. I was in the lab the whole time, and since my PM was keeping an eye on me, I could turn around and ask if he needed anything since he kept passing by, then start my timer back. Anyway, I got away with it long enough to find a new job, especially since I applied to jobs on the clock. I quit and am now making 45% more in salary, and now they are over 1750 samples behind, which is 2 weeks worth even for me, a month at their current rate. I never got more than 400 samples behind at my laziest, and that almost broke my laziness strike cause I actually have an alright work ethic. Upper management, meaning 2 or 3 people above his boss, are now getting involved to see why the samples are so far behind, and action is taken to look into what can be done. I am friends with 2 of my old coworkers. One apologized to me and said he thought I was lazy and not doing my work, but now it's even affecting him since 2 people were taken off his team to replace me and I am no longer organizing and cleaning. Messiness gives me extreme panic, so I always organized, just didn't let my boss know, and now my old coworker can't find anything cause nothing is where it belongs. The other one passed my boss and said, "Bet you wish you just gave her the $2 per hour she asked for," and he made a nervous laugh but didn't say anything. The last one is titled, "In which I sterilized my mother's house." I was a new divorcee around 20 years old and had to move back in with my mother. I had just recently been diagnosed with leukemia and started chemo, so I obviously wasn't working. You know, tired, sick, blah, blah, blah. My mother, before she left for her own job that morning, told me that since I wasn't working I need to be cleaning her house. She's never been a sympathetic person, but that's a story for a different blog. So she tells me to clean the house. MC sets in and I decide that if she wants a clean house I'll give her a clean house. I sterilized that mofo. I scrubbed and mopped and swept and dusted and vacuumed. I pretty much wore myself out doing all this. My dad, they're divorced but still get along really well, popped by while I was finishing up. He comes in and sees me practically dead from exertion. He takes a look around and says, "You've been busy. Why did you do all of this?" I told him what Mum had said and he tells me to go lay down, he'll talk to her. So I'm laying there. I couldn't sleep mainly because I wanted to hear him chewing her out for it. He started in on her and all she could think of was, "I didn't mean for her to do all this." Over and over and over. It worked. She never again told me that since I wasn't working, I needed to be her maid. Thanks for listening.